In the shadowed corridors of the Palazzo Medici, where power whispered through stone walls and ambition hung thick as Florentine fog, Niccolo Machiavelli penned his observations not merely on statecraft, but on the fundamental nature of human relationships. His quills scratched against parchment in the dim candlelight, capturing truths that would echo through centuries, truths about power, weakness, and the intricate dance between men and women that shapes the very foundation of society. The year was 1513, and Machiavelli, exiled from the political arena he once dominated, found himself with time to contemplate the deeper mechanics of human nature. What he discovered in his observations would challenge conventional wisdom and reveal patterns of behavior that transcended the boundaries of his era. In his private writings, later discovered among his personal effects, lay insights that spoke to the eternal struggle between strength and weakness, dominance and submission, and the surprising ways in which these forces manifested in the relationships between men and women. The nature of feminine desire. A Machiavellian revelation. Machiavelli's understanding of women emerged not from romantic fantasy but from cold observation of power dynamics. In the courts of Renaissance Italy, he witnessed how the most influential women, from Catherine de' Medici to Lucrezia Borgia, responded not to supplication and weakness, but to displays of controlled strength and unwavering purpose. This observation led him to a startling conclusion that would challenge the courtly love traditions of his time. "Fortune is a woman," Machiavelli wrote in The Prince, "and it is necessary, if one wants to hold her down, to beat her and fight with her." This provocative metaphor extended beyond mere allegory about fate and chance. It revealed his understanding that feminine nature, like fortune herself, responds to masculine energy that is bold, decisive, and unafraid to assert itself. Yet his wisdom went deeper than surface interpretations might suggest. In his private correspondence with Francesco Vittori, Machiavelli elaborated on this theme with greater nuance. Women, he observed, possessed an innate ability to detect weakness in men, a survival mechanism honed through centuries of dependence on masculine protection. This detection system operated below the level of conscious thought, manifesting as attraction or repulsion based on subtle cues of strength or vulnerability. The women of the Florentine court, Machiavelli noted, gravitated toward men who demonstrated what he termed controlled ferocity, a combination of gentleness and strength that suggested both the capacity for tenderness and the ability to defend what they valued. These men did not seek approval or permission. They stated their intentions clearly and pursued their goals with unwavering determination, yet always within the bounds of honor and respect. Consider the case of Giuliano de' Medici, whom Machiavelli observed during his rise to power. Giuliano's approach to women exemplified this principle perfectly. When he encountered a woman who captured his interest, he did not shower her with gifts or proclamations of undying love. Instead, he approached with quiet confidence, stating his intentions clearly and directly. "I find you intriguing," he might say, "and I believe we should spend time together." This directness, backed by his obvious competence and strength of character, proved irresistible to women who had grown weary of men who sought to win their favor through weakness disguised as devotion. The key insight Machiavelli gleaned from such observations was that women desired to be handled, not in the sense of manipulation or disrespect, but in the way a skilled horseman handles a spirited mare, with confidence, clear intention, and respect for the power they possessed. Women, he realized, wanted men who could match their own inner strength, who could provide the stability and direction that complemented their natural intuition and emotional intelligence. This handling manifested in several specific ways that Machiavelli documented through his observations. First, women responded to men who made decisions without seeking excessive input or approval. A prince who consulted his counsel was wise. A man who consulted his woman on every trivial matter appeared weak and indecisive. Second, women were drawn to men who maintained their own interests and pursuits rather than abandoning their ambitions in service of romantic attachment. The man who sacrificed his goals for love often found that love diminishing in return. Third, and perhaps most importantly, women desired men who could say no to them when necessary. This contradiction, that women wanted men who would deny them their immediate desires, puzzled many of Machiavelli's contemporaries. Yet his observations consistently confirmed this pattern. Women tested men constantly, probing for weaknesses and boundaries. A man who capitulated to every demand or whim quickly lost the respect and attraction he had initially inspired. The correspondence between Machiavelli and his friend Lorenzo di Filippo Strozzi provides illuminating examples of these principles in action. Lorenzo had been struggling with his wife, Clarice, who had become increasingly difficult and demanding. Following Machiavelli's advice, Lorenzo began implementing a different approach. When Clarice demanded expensive fabrics for a new dress, Lorenzo calmly explained that such expenditure was not in their current budget and suggested alternatives. When she pressed the matter with tears and emotional manipulation, he maintained his position with gentle but firm resolve. The result, as Lorenzo reported in subsequent letters, was transformative. Clarice's initial anger gave way to a new respect for her husband's backbone. She began seeking his opinion on matters she had previously handled independently, and their intimate relationship, which had grown cold during Lorenzo's period of weakness, reignited with passionate intensity. Machiavelli understood that this dynamic arose from deep evolutionary patterns. Women, as the bearers and nurturers of children, required partners who could provide not just resources but protection and leadership during vulnerable periods. Their attraction mechanisms had evolved to identify men capable of fulfilling these roles, and weakness in a potential mate triggered instinctive rejection, regardless of conscious desires for egalitarian relationships. Yet Machiavelli's insights extended beyond mere attraction to encompass the ongoing dynamics of successful relationships. He observed that women continued to test their partners throughout long-term relationships, not out of malice but from an unconscious need to ensure their mate remained strong and capable. Men who understood this testing as a natural feminine behavior, rather than taking it personally or responding with hurt feelings, maintained their relationship's passion and stability far more successfully than those who interpreted such behavior as rejection or criticism. The most successful men in Machiavelli's observation possessed what he termed amused mastery, the ability to respond to feminine testing with good humor and unshakable confidence. When a woman became emotional or unreasonable, these men neither dismissed her feelings nor capitulated to her demands. Instead, they acknowledged her emotional state while maintaining their own course of action, often with a slight smile that suggested they understood the game being played. This approach required tremendous self-discipline and emotional maturity. It demanded that men develop their own inner strength to the point where external approval, even from women they loved deeply, became unnecessary for their sense of self-worth. Only from this position of internal security could a man handle a woman's tests and challenges with the confident grace that inspired her deepest admiration and devotion. Machiavelli's observations on this matter culminated in a simple but profound insight. Women did not want to be pedestalized or worshipped as the troubadour tradition suggested. Such treatment felt hollow and false, based on an idealized image rather than genuine appreciation of their complex nature. Instead, they wanted to be understood, challenged, and guided by men who had developed their own strength sufficiently to remain unswayed by emotional manipulation while still being capable of deep love and genuine care. The destruction of the weak self, the foundation of invincibility. The second great insight that emerged from Machiavelli's years of observation and contemplation concerned the nature of personal power and invulnerability. In the quiet hours of his exile, removed from the immediate pressures of political life, he began to understand that true strength came not from external defenses, but from the systematic elimination of internal weaknesses. This realization would prove as revolutionary as his insights into statecraft, for it addressed the fundamental question of how a man might become truly unassailable. The weak self, as Machiavelli conceived it, consisted of all those aspects of personality and character that made an individual vulnerable to manipulation, control, and destruction by others. These weaknesses included the desperate need for approval, the fear of judgment, the inability to tolerate discomfort, the tendency to avoid difficult decisions, and the habit of seeking external validation for one's sense of worth. Each of these characteristics created leverage points that enemies could exploit, making even the most outwardly powerful individual susceptible to defeat. Machiavelli's understanding of this principle crystallized during his observation of Cesare Borgia, the ruthless Duke of Valentinois, whose rise and fall provided one of history's most instructive examples of the relationship between inner strength and outer power. Initially, Borgia appeared invincible. His military prowess, political cunning, and willingness to use extreme measures had carved out a substantial territory in central Italy. Yet Machiavelli detected fatal flaws in Borgia's character that would ultimately prove his undoing. Chief among these flaws was Borgia's need for his father's approval and support. Despite his outward independence, Cesare remained emotionally dependent on Pope Alexander VI, requiring constant validation of his actions and decisions. This dependency created a vulnerability that his enemies eventually exploited. When the Pope fell ill and died, Borgia's entire power structure collapsed because he had never developed the internal strength necessary to stand alone. The contrast with men like Lorenzo de' Medici the Magnificent was instructive. Lorenzo had systematically eliminated his need for external validation while cultivating an unshakable inner confidence. When enemies arose against him, they found no emotional leverage points to exploit. His sense of worth derived from his own assessment of his character and actions, rather than from the opinions of others. This internal security made him nearly impossible to manipulate or intimidate, as he genuinely cared little for what his critics thought of him. Machiavelli began to develop a systematic approach to destroying the weak self based on his observations of such men. The process required ruthless self-examination and the willingness to confront uncomfortable truths about one's own character. It demanded that a man identify and eliminate each source of inner weakness that could be used against him by others. The first step in this process involved developing complete honesty about one's motivations and desires. Most men, Machiavelli observed, lived in a state of self-deception, telling themselves noble stories about their actions while remaining unconscious of their true driving forces. A man who could not acknowledge his own desire for power, recognition, or pleasure remained vulnerable to those who understood these hidden motivations better than he did himself. Francesco Soderini, the Gonfaloniere of Florence, exemplified this type of self-deception. He genuinely believed himself motivated by patriotism and civic duty, yet his actions consistently revealed a desperate need to be liked and respected by all parties. This unconscious need made him predictable and manipulable, as his enemies could influence his decisions simply by threatening his reputation or popularity. Had Soderini honestly examined his motivations, he might have recognized this vulnerability and worked to eliminate it before it destroyed his effectiveness. The second step required developing indifference to external judgment and criticism. This did not mean becoming callous or uncaring about the effects of one's actions on others, but rather freeing oneself from the need for approval and validation. The man who could remain centered and confident regardless of whether others praised or condemned him possessed a form of invulnerability that no external force could breach. Machiavelli practiced this principle himself during his exile. Initially, the loss of his position and the hostility of his former colleagues had devastated him emotionally. He found himself constantly worrying about his reputation, desperately seeking opportunities to restore his political standing, and suffering from the contempt of those who had once sought his favor. This suffering, he realized, stemmed entirely from his attachment to external validation, rather than from any real harm to his person or circumstances. Through systematic practice, Machiavelli learned to derive his sense of worth from his own assessment of his character and actions. He spent hours each day in self-examination, honestly evaluating his thoughts, feelings, and behaviors according to his own standards of excellence rather than the opinions of others. Gradually, he found that criticism and praise affected him equally little, as his emotional stability no longer depended on external feedback. The third step involved eliminating comfort-seeking behaviors and developing the ability to tolerate discomfort without complaint or avoidance. Machiavelli observed that most people's actions were driven by the desire to avoid pain and pursue pleasure, making them predictable and controllable. The man who could remain equally content regardless of his circumstances possessed a form of freedom that others could not take away. This principle extended beyond physical comfort to encompass emotional and social discomfort as well. The man who feared loneliness could be controlled through social isolation. The man who needed constant entertainment and stimulation could be manipulated through boredom. The man who required luxury and ease could be defeated through hardship. Yet the individual who had learned to find contentment within himself regardless of external circumstances remained essentially uncontrollable. Machiavelli developed specific practices to cultivate this indifference to comfort. He would deliberately choose the most uncomfortable chair in any room, eat simple foods when elaborate meals were available, and sleep on hard surfaces when soft beds were offered. These small acts of voluntary discomfort trained his mind to remain at peace regardless of circumstances, gradually eliminating his vulnerability to those who might try to control him through manipulation of his environment. The fourth step required developing complete emotional independence, particularly from the need for love and affection. This aspect of Machiavelli's philosophy proved most difficult for many to understand, as it seemed to advocate coldness and isolation. Yet his insight was more nuanced. The man who needed love and affection could be controlled through their withdrawal, while the man who could give love freely without requiring it in return possessed a form of power that others found irresistible. Machiavelli's own relationships exemplified this principle. His marriage to Marietta Corsini had initially been troubled by his desperate need for her approval and affection. He found himself constantly seeking reassurance of her love, becoming jealous and possessive when she showed attention to others, and altering his behavior to please her. These behaviors, ironically, made him less attractive and lovable, creating a downward spiral that threatened to destroy their relationship. By eliminating his need for Marietta's love while continuing to love her freely and generously, Machiavelli transformed their dynamic completely. He stopped seeking constant reassurance, ceased trying to control her behavior, and focused instead on being the kind of man worthy of love rather than demanding it as a right. The result was a deepening of their relationship and a return of the passion and affection he had been desperately seeking. The fifth and final step involved accepting complete responsibility for one's circumstances and outcomes. Machiavelli observed that most people remained weak because they blamed external forces for their problems, seeking to change their environment rather than themselves. This victim mentality created a fundamental dependency on others and circumstances, making true independence impossible. The strong man, by contrast, assumed complete responsibility for everything that happened to him, recognizing that his responses to circumstances mattered more than the circumstances themselves. This perspective granted him tremendous power, as he focused his energy on the factors he could actually control, his thoughts, emotions, decisions, and actions, rather than wasting it on futile attempts to control others or external events. Through this process of systematically destroying every aspect of his weak self, a man could achieve what Machiavelli termed philosophical invincibility, a state of inner strength that no external force could breach. Such a man could not be bribed because he needed nothing others could offer. He could not be threatened because he feared nothing they could do to him. He could not be manipulated because he required nothing they could withhold from him. This invincibility extended to all areas of life, including relationships with women. The man who had destroyed his weak self approached women from a position of complete emotional independence, able to love and appreciate them without needing their approval or affection for his own well-being. This independence, paradoxically, made him more attractive and lovable than desperate pursuit ever could. The integration of strength, living the Machiavellian ideal, the final phase of Machiavellian wisdom, involved integrating these insights into a coherent approach to life that combined effectiveness with authenticity, strength with compassion, and independence with genuine connection. This integration required understanding how the destruction of the weak self enhanced rather than diminished one's capacity for meaningful relationships and lasting happiness. Many who studied Machiavelli's work superficially concluded that his philosophy advocated ruthless selfishness and emotional coldness. This interpretation missed the profound humanity underlying his insights. The man who had achieved mastery over his own weaknesses gained the freedom to act from love rather than need, to give rather than take, and to serve causes greater than himself without sacrificing his own integrity or strength. The integration began with recognizing that true strength served not only the individual, but the broader community as well. The weak man, driven by desperate needs and unconscious fears, inevitably acted in ways that harmed others even when he intended kindness. His neediness created burdens for those around him. His lack of self-knowledge led to unpredictable and often destructive behavior. His inability to tolerate discomfort meant that others had to manage his emotional state as well as their own. The strong man, having eliminated these sources of unconscious harm, could focus entirely on constructive action. His emotional independence freed those around him from the burden of managing his feelings. His self-knowledge made him predictable and trustworthy. His ability to tolerate discomfort meant that others could rely on him to remain stable during difficult periods. In relationships with women, this integration manifested as what Machiavelli termed benevolent dominance, a form of masculine leadership that combined unwavering strength with genuine care and respect. The man who had destroyed his weak self could provide the kind of handling women truly desired, precisely because he needed nothing from them in return. His guidance came from love rather than neediness, his decisions from wisdom rather than fear, and his strength from inner security rather than external validation. Consider the example of Giovanni de' Medici, later Pope Leo X, whose approach to relationships exemplified this integrated strength. Giovanni possessed complete confidence in his own worth and direction, yet used this strength in service of others' highest good. When interacting with women, he listened carefully to their concerns and feelings while maintaining clear boundaries about what he would and would not accept. He offered guidance and support freely, yet never at the expense of his own integrity or long-term vision. This approach created profound attraction and devotion in the women who encountered it. They felt simultaneously cherished and challenged, supported and elevated. Giovanni's emotional independence meant that they never had to worry about managing his feelings or tiptoeing around his insecurities. His strength provided the security they craved, while his love gave them the appreciation they deserved. The integration also required understanding how to use power responsibly. Machiavelli observed that those who had achieved true strength bore a responsibility to use it constructively rather than destructively. The man who could not be manipulated or controlled possessed tremendous power over those who remained trapped by their weaknesses. And this power came with corresponding obligations. The ethical use of strength demanded what Machiavelli called enlightened self-interest, the recognition that one's long-term happiness and success depended on the well-being of the broader community. The strong man therefore used his power to elevate others rather than exploit their weaknesses, to create value rather than extract it, and to build rather than destroy. In practical terms, this meant using one's emotional independence to provide stability for others during turbulent times, using one's freedom from approval-seeking to speak difficult truths that needed to be heard, and using one's immunity to manipulation to protect those who remained vulnerable to such exploitation. Machiavelli's own later years provided examples of this integrated approach. Despite his exile and the hostility of his political enemies, he used his freedom and wisdom to mentor younger men who sought guidance. His letters reveal a man who had achieved genuine peace through strength, offering advice and support to others without expecting anything in return. His relationship with his sons exemplified this integration. Rather than seeking their approval or trying to be liked by them, Machiavelli focused on providing the guidance and discipline they needed to develop their own strength and character. He was firm when firmness was required, gentle when gentleness would serve them better, and always consistent in his love and commitment to their development. The integration of these principles created what Machiavelli regarded as the highest form of human existence, a life of purposeful action guided by wisdom, strength, and genuine love. Such a life required constant vigilance against the re-emergence of weak patterns, ongoing commitment to truth and self-knowledge, and the courage to act according to one's principles regardless of external pressures. The man who had successfully integrated these insights possessed several distinctive characteristics that set him apart from others. He moved through the world with quiet confidence, neither seeking attention nor avoiding it. He spoke truthfully but kindly, offering his perspective without needing others to agree with it. He made decisions based on his own assessment of what was right and beneficial, rather than on popular opinion or the desire to please others. In relationships, he loved freely without possessiveness, supported others without enabling weakness, and maintained his own standards without imposing them on others. He could be alone without loneliness, and in company without losing himself. He pursued his goals with determination while remaining flexible about methods and timing. Perhaps most importantly, he had developed what Machiavelli termed philosophical equanimity, the ability to remain equally content with success or failure, praise or criticism, pleasure or discomfort. This equanimity arose not from indifference but from the deep understanding that his essential worth and happiness depended on factors within his control rather than on external circumstances. The culmination of this integrated approach was the achievement of what Machiavelli considered true freedom, the ability to choose one's responses to any situation based on wisdom and principle rather than being driven by unconscious needs, fears, or desires. This freedom was not the license to do whatever one pleased, but rather the capacity to do what one genuinely believed was right, regardless of external pressures or internal resistance. Such freedom required tremendous discipline and self-knowledge, but it offered rewards that no external achievement could match. The free man lived authentically, loved genuinely, and acted purposefully. He created value wherever he went and left the world better than he found it. He achieved the integration of power and love that represents the highest potential of human existence. This integration represented the ultimate goal of Machiavellian wisdom, not the cynical manipulation of others for selfish gain, but the development of sufficient inner strength to serve others and pursue worthy goals without being corrupted by the process. It demanded destroying everything weak within oneself, not to become cold and isolated, but to become capable of genuine warmth and connection. It required eliminating dependency on others, not to avoid relationships, but to enter them from a position of strength rather than neediness. In this integrated state, the handling of women became natural and effortless because it arose from genuine strength and care rather than from techniques or strategies. The man who had destroyed his weak self possessed the confident masculinity that women truly desired, expressed through actions that honored both his own integrity and their deepest needs. The journey toward this integration was difficult and ongoing, requiring constant vigilance against the re-emergence of old patterns and the cultivation of new levels of strength and wisdom. Yet for those who undertook it seriously, it offered the possibility of achieving what Machiavelli regarded as the greatest prize available to human beings: a life of authentic power, genuine love, and meaningful contribution to the world. In the end, Machiavelli's greatest insight was that true invincibility came not from defeating others but from mastering oneself, and that this mastery served not only the individual but everyone whose life they touched. The prince who conquered his own weaknesses gained the power to serve his people wisely. The man who destroyed his weak self gained the strength to love others truly. This was the ultimate paradox and the ultimate truth of the Machiavellian path, that the complete elimination of weakness made possible the highest expression of human strength, compassion, and love. Thus concluded the wisdom that Niccolò Machiavelli gleaned through years of observation, exile, and contemplation. His insights into the nature of feminine desire and masculine strength would echo through the centuries, offering guidance to those who sought to understand the eternal dance of power, love, and human nature. In the destruction of the weak self lay not the path to coldness and isolation, but the road to authentic strength and genuine connection, the foundation upon which all lasting happiness and success must ultimately rest.